Good morning, and welcome to our Saturday morning lecture series. This morning it is with the Reverend Teijo Munnich, who is the abbess and founder of Great Tree Temple, and who thought up these Saturday morning lectures and found the diverse group of people that have been speaking. Good morning, Teijo. Would you please do the opening sutra for us?
Let me get settled here. Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. I had the other computer turned off.
I just said you were wonderful and that you had set up all these Saturday morning talks for us and the diverse group of people that we've had. And thank you. Would you do the opening sutra for us?
And surpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teaching.
And before the talk, we'll have a brief message about the dana.
Good morning. In Buddhism, when practitioners share their understanding of the teachings and practice, it is offered freely as a practice of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this practice is done without expectation of getting something in return. This is the spirit of speaking about the Dharma. Other ways to practice dana are to offer support to those who share the teachings, to support places of spiritual practice, and to give without judgment or expectation when opportunities arise. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis. Please support their practice by doing what you can. And I will include a link in the chat section to Great Tree's giving page for this morning's talk. Thank you.
There you are. Since I already said that you were the founder and the abbess of Great Tree and that you were the wonderful person who set up our Saturday morning talks, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'd like to thank you, Lorna, for being so diligent in being here and getting online. And thanks to all of you for coming. Good morning. So as you know, a few weeks ago, I was, along with some other members of the Great Tree Sangha, I was in Los Angeles for a big precept study and ceremony. And at that time, some of us were asked to give Dharma talks. There were about 98 participants, and there were, I guess, 80 or so what were called staff. Those of us that sort of created the container for for the participants, those who were receiving the precepts. And the container, those of us who were the container. And actually, I didn't realize it until I kind of thought back. And also we talked about this the other night, on Thursday night. Some of you were here. And particularly when Brooke Genru was talking about feeling so kind of surrounded, or maybe, I don't know if you use that word container, but I immediately had this visual of the way that this traditional ceremony is set up. You know, there's people all around who are really there just to kind of support the whole process and make the whole process happen. So I was part of the container. And we arrived a few days early, the container, so that we could have rehearsals. And it was a little more kind of casual and relaxed. And then the ceremony started, and they went on for 5 days. But even though things were much more relaxed the first couple of days, I just saw a message from Yuge about giving. If you could, anything you want to contribute today, could you please contribute to the scholarship fund? I'm trying to raise some money for Tere Genjo, who was at the ceremony and had to borrow some money in order to do it. So if you send anything for this talk today, send it to Great Tree and then let us know that it's for the scholarship fund. Anyway, thank you, Yuge, did you put in the Great Tree link? Did you do? Oh, okay. Okay, so you can send it to Great Tree, but indicate what it's for. Otherwise, it will just go into the general fund. I don't know, somehow we haven't worked out a way to designate in that way. But so going back to the ceremony, so becoming this container, all we were doing really was following directions and figuring things out kind of as we went. And this is ceremony is done every 15 years at Zenchuji Temple, and but it's the first time it's in English. And also, I was told that that this kind of ceremony is the main way that most lay practitioners in Japan receive the precepts and perhaps receive a Raksu and certainly the lineage papers. So there may be like 500 or something. This temple couldn't hold that many, so we were only allowed to bring 2 from each temple until it got to be 100. So anyway, the intensity of the ceremony started on the 3rd day that we were there, which was a Wednesday. And as I mentioned, I was asked to give a talk, and I was pretty nervous about it because I was limited to 45 minutes, which is always kind of challenging for me to have any kind of limitation like that. And so I thought, okay, I've got to really pull together my thoughts and really, put them together in such a way that they will be meaningful for the listeners. Because I wanted to kind of, help inspire the people that were there. Because it can be kind of intense, and probably everyone that was there had at least one meltdown. So myself, I had my meltdowns around giving my talk. And I think the problem was that I had prepared so much. I'd been thinking about this for a couple months that I couldn't possibly pull it all together. And at the same time, I kept having more questions come up. I was emailing Shohaku at 4 o'clock in the morning. He was in a different hotel. And can you answer this question? Can you answer this question? And he was actually sending me segments from his book on the precepts that is about to be published, which gave me even more to think about. So in other words, what happened is I over-prepared. And if any of you have read my piece in one of the books that several women teachers put together, I can't remember which one it is. It's the one on the Eightfold Path. This same thing happened to me with that. I had a real deja vu around this, that somehow I just had so much to say and I just couldn't. I like to try and choreograph things, so that they have a natural movement to them. And so this was that same kind of experience. And in the end, what I did with my, the thing that I wrote was I just put aside all the pages and pages and pages of stuff that I was trying to pull together and just started from scratch and wrote about something almost completely different than what I had originally planned. And so anyway, I had some real major meltdowns around this. And I went to the Zendo. Fortunately, they have a Zendo there. And because everyone was so busy, no one else was in the Zendo. So it gave me a quiet space to go to. And I just kind of took the morning off from my other duties, which was to be in ceremonies, and just said, if you need me, I'll be in the Zendo. What I have realized in this whole process, though, and some of you have heard me talking about bodhicitta recently, which let's just do this little exercise for people in the group who haven't done it. Close your eyes and think about the very first time that you ever sat down in Zazen, or one of the first times. And why? What's your feeling about what brought you back, or what you experienced that caused you to continue to do this practice, to continue to pursue it? So you probably, if you didn't get a quick glimpse, probably you need to try again sometime. But most time people will tell me, and this happened to me, my teacher did this with us one time, and immediately I could remember. I remembered it. I'm touching my body because I remembered it in my body. And I think, bodhicitta, or the bodhi mind, is awakened mind. It's also called a way-seeking mind, which means that when we awaken in that way, it's a very honest kind of awakening without our head kind of telling us what's going on. Just that experience, that the experience itself informs us about what's going on. That is what we experienced at some point that brought us to the practice. So I say, and then also the other way of looking at it is bodhicitta is why we practice, to keep getting in touch with that genuine aspiration. That Katagiri Roshi called it original intention. That's your original intention. And he said that was our vow. Because I was having a little trouble with the word vow. I had it in my head. I don't know if this is what I was taught or whether this is what I just thought, that somehow it was something that I was told to do, that I had to make a vow to make myself do it. But Katagiri Roshi always talked about vow, and I had a feeling it was something different. And so I kept asking him and asking him. So he finally had us do this little exercise, and he said, that's vow. And that vow really, he said original intention. I say our honest aspiration. What is it that when we touch it, we feel the truth of life. We experience life in a very open and honest way. And that is what causes us to practice. And that is what we cultivate through practice, through just sitting down and looking at a wall. And so I said to myself when I was looking at this, so what is the connection between bodhicitta as way-seeking mind, or that which causes us to practice, and bodhicitta as that which we awaken to again and again through this practice, or what we return to, so to speak. What I concluded, I've been thinking about this all fall, so some of you have already heard me talking about this. what I started to notice about bodhicitta, about that awakened experience, is that it happens when we let go. And the thing about letting go is we can't make it happen. And so that's a little tricky, because if we try to let go, it's not really letting go. Letting go happens simultaneously with letting go, so to speak. I know that sounds kind of strange, but we're part of the whole experience of life when we let go of our ideas about what life is. So I was thinking, about my subject was the Shila Paramita. Each one of the speakers chose one of the paramitas to talk about. Dana is a paramita. Dana is giving. Kshanti is a paramita. Kshantiya is impatience. Effort, I can't remember what the word for effort is. There are 6 paramitas. And wisdom, or prajna, is a paramita. And Shila. So Shila is the paramita that I was speaking about. Shila is, I think it's spelled S-I-L-A. It's Sanskrit or Pali. I think it's Sanskrit. And it means morality. It also has a meaning of habit, developing a habit. And presumably this is to develop a good habit. And Shila is different, really. Sometimes it's translated as the precepts, but it's different than the precepts in the Vinaya. The Vinaya is a body of precepts for monks and nuns. Actually, it's basically some rules that were guidelines, kind of. Maybe you could say rules that were created by Buddha in response to some of the things that monks and nuns did in his Sangha, in the original Sangha. And maybe they'd come and complain to him. You can read about this in Lives of the Disciples. Somebody does something, and then somebody goes and tells Buddha, and Buddha said, we shouldn't do this. And then it became rules. And I think there's over 200 of these. And there's more for women, because it included things like in India, in the in the 4th century BC, or whatever it is called now, that women had to go out with someone. They couldn't go out alone. So there were various precepts that came as a result of Buddha living together with his Sangha. During the rainy season, they'd stop. Other times they'd wander. So when they were living together, these came up. But it's said about Shila and about the precepts, the Shila precepts, is that when Buddha awakened, the precepts were there. So that awakening was before Buddha ever had a Sangha, before he ever started teaching. So these are not connected. These are not seen as rules. The precepts are not seen as rules in Buddhism. Reb Anderson, Tenshin Reb Anderson from the San Francisco Zen Center, gave some talks. And he talked about these precepts, which are called bodhisattva precepts. He called them, just a minute, I think he called them things that are conducive to liberation. Yeah. He said, and he called them the major precepts. Sometimes they're called the prohibitory precepts, but that's really not a good way of talking about them, because that implies the not doing and that kind of rule mentality. But this is not about the rules. And so, as Shohaku was pointing out, Shohaku gave 3 talks, and Tenshin Reb Anderson gave 3 talks. And as Shohaku was pointing out, these sometimes we break a precept because, in a sense, it's breaking the precept. That following the spirit of the precept sometimes is to actually go against what the precept is saying. And I think he was using the precept of anger in his example. That sometimes anger is a useful thing. Maybe it causes us to act, whereas we might not. We might be passive about something that should be acted on. But if anger comes up around it, that we can use it for some kind of action to bring about awareness. So this idea of these major bodhisattva precepts, which are the 10 guidelines that, as he says, are conducive to liberation. They're conducive to liberation because they're places where we can easily get stuck. And that stuckness is not necessarily through it can manifest through our actions, but it really comes from the way we think. And so Tenshin Roshi was talking about was how do we approach these precepts in a way that is conducive to liberation? So Shila is seen as morality, is seen as developing good habits, but habits that are conducive to liberation, and not just liberation for me, but when I experience that liberation, it that kind of, when any of us experiences that liberation, when any of us awakens to bodhicitta, which means, for example, when we're sitting on the cushion, we can do this not sitting on the cushion too, but when we're sitting on the cushion and basically doing nothing, shikantaza means kind of doing nothing, or I say resisting the compulsion to do something. When we're sitting there and just allowing life to express itself to us, what we see all the busyness of our mind. We see that we get caught up in thinking. We see if we're angry. We see those kinds of things. We notice, but when we notice them, that is a kind of letting go. It's a letting go of the kind of that which is causing us to believe solely in the way we think about life, just solely in our perceptions. And that letting go sort of happens when we just sit there, and as Katagiri Roshi used to say, when we sit down and shut up. And as I've mentioned before, Katagiri Roshi would not tell us much. He'd say, well, just if you notice that you're thinking too much, just take a deep breath, something like that. That's about as much instruction he would give us. And Harada Seke Roshi actually made a distinction between breath awareness and shikantaza. Shikantaza is just sitting. He said shikantaza is to not do anything, not even breath awareness. So, and then I told Katagiri Roshi, well, Radha Roshi said it was this, and you said it was this. And he said, nobody knows what Shikantazi is. So anyway, what we're basically doing is we're just sitting there and basically seeing what's happening. And I think probably the best description of it is what we used to say in Minnesota. I don't know where this came from, but we used to call it watching your own movie. Probably came from San Francisco. It is like watching your own movie. And what do you do when you watch a movie? You just watch it. You know, when you're watching a movie, you really, you can't change it. You might have ideas about how you want to change it, but basically, you're just watching it. And that's kind of what Shikantazi is, just sitting there, and we very naturally notice. So letting go happens, and bodhicitta happens every single time we sit down. Every time we sit down, that happens. Sounds simple, but it's sometimes difficult, because some of the things that we see are things that we don't want to see, or that make us feel uncomfortable. But if we don't try to do something about it and create more thinking, we just allow ourselves to be with it, and then it comes up again, and then we notice it again. Each time we notice it, we're letting go. So this is the relationship that I see between bodhicitta as that which brings us to this practice, and bodhicitta as something which we continue to cultivate, and that is the letting go. Because, without interviewing each one of you individually, I can say that probably most of the people here came to this practice because of something that wasn't working in their lives. Some kind of sense of failure, something that caused each one of us to kind of forced each one of us to let go. I talk about in my case, I had fallen in love. I had become very attached to someone, and he just told me to get out of his life. And so I didn't have a choice about letting go, but at some point I had to let go. And when I let go, I knew that I needed to do something like meditation. I had done meditation when I was younger. I knew that I needed to do something to kind of quiet my mind. I was grasping for something. But anyway, letting go happened somewhere in there. It had to happen in order for me to move on with my life. The other choice, of course, was to commit suicide, which I discarded because I realized that I wasn't brave enough to do that. So I realized immediately that I couldn't do that. And so my choice was to move on in my life without having this person in my life in the way that I wanted him to be. So every one of us probably had something like that, which put us into that spaciousness that is bodhicitta. And we experience this in Zazen. And we may not notice that we experience it because we might judge that experience as not real. But actually, it is the reality of life, because what we're experiencing at that moment is something that makes us want to grasp, makes us want to have something to hold on to, which is dukkha, which causes us to chase after something that gives us a sense of stability. But what we actually experience at that moment is that quickly movingness of life, the fast, changing of life, the impermanence, and how quickly everything is changing. It changes by the time we think about it. The experience of what we think about is already past, so we're judging it. And so it doesn't feel, it's not something we can understand with our intellectual mind. Dogen writes about it, but you can't even understand what Dogen's writing about in any way unless you've actually experienced this. And experienced it inside. I mean, we all experience it at times. Sometimes we don't know, we don't recognize exactly what's happened, but that letting go, sometimes we just, kind of give up, and then things start to flow. And part of what I came to in thinking about all of this is that, first of all, I said the precepts remind us in our everyday life, or help to awaken to bodhicitta. They help us. They can be guides that, if we have these, and each one of us probably is drawn to certain precepts, that particularly apply to our lives, things we want to work on. And so we probably are reminded of it, of a particular precept in certain situations. I know that's really true for me. And that reminder, just having those precepts out there on our radar is a reminder, and that's in it, and we can awaken to bodhicitta at that moment. And when we awaken to bodhicitta, we respond from a place of being present, because shikantaza really just puts us into the present moment. And so I started talking about the experience that I was having at this Jukai study and ceremony. And the reason I started talking about it was because I wanted to talk about the relationship between bodhicitta and the precepts. And what I came to is bodhicitta. I started out just now saying the precepts, having the precepts on our radar can awaken bodhicitta. But when we awaken to bodhicitta, when we awaken to, I say our original aspiration, but our original aspiration, original vow, original intention really comes from that experience of reality, which is to experience the impermanence of life and learn how to be present within that movement rather than always feeling uncomfortable with that. And also we experience the connection that we have with other beings and the support that we have from other beings, and other beings besides the being which we perceive ourselves to be, which thinks in a certain way and might get caught in a certain way of thinking. And that experience of going outside or letting go of our own thinking, even for a moment. If you're working on a problem or something, that all beings, all these subtle life forms, and maybe even someone in the room who kind of has an answer for us, we just receive the support of those beings. Even this container that the so-called staff made is an experience of beings supporting us, and then we don't have to worry. I often quote Kadagiri Roshi, something I transcribed, that he said, "We live by our effort, but not only by our effort, we're supported by all beings." So that's kind of when we experience that support of all beings, when we experience the quickly moving energy, which is life, in which we live, then we can act more genuinely. We're not just acting from our head. And also this relationship that we're within, when we experience that relationship and how we affect each other, then we don't want to do something to create disharmony in that relationship. When we act in harmonious ways, that causes other people to act in harmonious ways, and other beings, that energy field around us becomes more harmonious. Kadagiri Roshi used to talk about how our zazen gets into the walls. what I've experienced since I've moved to Western North Carolina, both at the Zen Center of Asheville when we were in West Asheville and also at Great Tree, is that it really, that harmonious energetic that gets created by our Zazen practice, where we all touch bodhicitta again and again. That harmonious energy goes beyond the walls and expands beyond the walls. So I was talking about bodhicitta as letting go, that experience of letting go. You can't make yourself let go. So that how do we do it? How do we find it? And we experience it always when we sit down and chat up in Zazen and practice Shikantaza. We experience it, and every time that we notice, oh, I'm thinking too much. Oh, I'm trying to solve this with my mind. There's a letting go that happens there. But what I also really recognize big time at this ceremony is that in our daily life, the letting go sometimes happens in ways that we don't particularly recognize or like. And in my case, it was the meltdowns that I was having around giving that talk at the week-long thing. And what I came to recognize is that a meltdown is a kind of letting go. And if I don't try to do something about it, if I don't add something more to the cause of the meltdown and kind of make it happen again, then I can, then I am in that place of being more honest with myself about what's going on. And so my way of interacting with others becomes more honest. So this was a really, really big experience for me to recognize the value of that meltdown. And of course, when you get into a situation with 180 people that is very packed, I mean, we're going to a couple nights, I was at rehearsals till 9 or 10 at night. And, we had to get up in the morning and be there we had to be there for a meeting at 8 o'clock, which is not that early, but it was very intense and the days were packed and we were, off schedule a little bit most of the time, but it would, we'd kind of try and make it up in other ways. So right before I went up to give my talk, I was approached by someone who was kind of in charge of a lot of stuff. And he asked me if we were kind of off schedule and could I make a 30-minute talk? And I was like, I don't know if I can do that. I've already got way too much material. So anyhow, what ended up is I probably had another meltdown again. I don't remember exactly, It's just like one continuous meltdown until after I gave my talk. But by the time all this was over, I was like so wide open. And I think probably, I don't know if I was able to make this point when I gave my talk, probably not. I don't honestly remember even what I talked about. But I think that everyone there had a point at which, we were squeezed to the point where things came up that we were maybe suppressing a little bit, or we thought we had dealt with and maybe we hadn't. And I think that that eventually what that did was it created a sense of sangha, a sense of harmony, because we all had to let go in order to be there. You couldn't be part of it and not deal with whatever was coming up. And the next day, let's see what time is it, 10:41. The next day is when, maybe it was when Tenshin Reb Anderson gave his talks on the precepts. He gave one on the same day and then two the next day. And I couldn't make it to one. If we had other things to do, we couldn't always make it to every event. And but I was in a meeting but I made it to the last one that he gave. And so I heard him talk about the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 precepts. And I'm not exactly sure what text he was working from. I thought it was Bodhidharma's precepts of one mind, and I wrote to him earlier this week to ask him about if he could share his notes with me, basically. But he was about to go into Rohatsu Sesshin, and all over the country, Zen people are doing Rohatsu Sesshin because December 8th, we celebrate Buddha's awakening. And so this is our chance to experience awakening. And so he talked about, I'll just share a few of the notes. Some of them I shared on Thursday, just to kind of give you a sense of how he was approaching them. And he called them the major bodhisattva precepts that are conducive to liberation. Bodhisattva is someone who awakens, and through that awakening is inclined to, it recognizes and inclined to awaken, to help all beings awaken. And that's kind of the bodhisattva practice. So we're not to recognize that we're not just doing this for ourselves, that we're doing this with all beings. So he said he started with I just have a few notes. The first one, as soon as he started talking about them, he started by talking about not speaking falsehoods. And he said, moistening false speech with the dew of Dharma. Moistening false speech with the dew of Dharma. And I mentioned on Thursday, there's 4 precepts about speech. And so when we find ourselves breaking one of these precepts, this idea of moistening false speech, and in this case, it's talking about lying, not speaking falsehoods, with the dew of Dharma, it gives a whole different feeling to it. And in order to moisten false speech with the dew of Dharma, it's necessary to return to the experience of bodhicitta, to let go of the false speech, to let go of that, even the inclination towards it. And then the 5th one, not dealing in intoxicants, he said it in 3 ways: not dealing with intoxicants, not abusing intoxicants. And like I said, don't know exactly what he was quoting, but it reads, leads us to enter the place where nothing can be brought in, guiding us to great brightness and treating us as future Buddhas. And what Tenshin Reb Anderson said is, this precept respects us and we need respect. This precept respects us. This precept of not dealing with or not entering the place where nothing can be brought in, nothing extra, nothing unnecessary. I was talking to somebody about this recently and kind of mentioning it, and she said, I really understand that precept. She says, I've been trying to clean out my life, and every time I get rid of something, I get something else. And so, this can apply to anything which intoxicates us. I always used to say, my mother's drug of choice was shopping. And after she couldn't get out to shop anymore, she learned how to shop online, you know. So there are lots of things that can be intoxicants in our life, things that we abuse in a sense as a way to escape. And he says the place where something can be brought in is a place of possible intoxication. So where and what is that place? So that's the thing that he was encouraging us to explore. Even before we find it, we still might try to bring something in. And we can notice that. And he used the word confess it or repent it. So repentance is acknowledging something, noticing it, and repenting is as soon as we notice it, we let go. But then, of course, it might come back, and often, usually it does. And then when it comes back, to keep making that effort to not get caught by that, because it's not conducive to liberation for us or within that relationship from all beings. And the next one is the sixth one, and I didn't quite get as many notes about this, but not discussing the faults of others. Or actually, it's really not discussing faults. That's how it reads. Not speaking against any being, speaking against others. Oh, he said this, not discussing the faults of others is a way, is a kind of a technique for control. Arousing the mind of great compassion. And then I have a triple asterisk on this one. See and rejoice in the virtues of others. And this is really a great practice for repentance or for letting go or for acknowledging, seeing and rejoicing in the virtues of others. And at our full moon gathering, which we do each full moon at 7 o'clock in the evening, one of the aspects that we bring to it from the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition is to think of someone that we have trouble with and to try and think of a good quality, to try and see good qualities. And sometimes that's very difficult. To see and rejoice in the virtues of others is another way of approaching this, not discussing the faults of others. Some of these I got kind of mixed together. I didn't quite see how he was distinguishing, but the seventh major precept conducive to liberation, not praising self and disparaging others. So here's another one to do with right speech. And what he said is, we study everything, including pride, if it should arise. So when we see ourselves doing this, rather than disparaging ourselves in the process, we study it. We study that pride that comes up. And he said, including begrudging, if it should arise. And begrudging, I know, comes up with, I think, the eighth precept. I can't remember the eighth or the ninth. Not begrudging the triple treasures. Not disparaging or just begrudging the triple treasures. And so I'm going to move to the ninth, because somehow I don't know when I didn't take down everything that he was saying about the eighth. And Brooke may have, Daniel may have more, because she also took notes. The ninth one is not being angry. And then he talks about regret. And I sometimes mention the Thich Nhat Hanh, the Dalai Lama talks about it in his book on the Four Noble Truths about karma, and how karma as a habit, and bringing up negative things sometimes. And he said, if we act, for example, if we act from anger, and then we say, oh, I shouldn't have done that. He said, that's good, because we caught ourselves and we saw what we did. And maybe the next several times we'll continue to do that and then catch ourselves. But maybe one time we'll kind of back up and catch ourselves before we act. And so this idea of regret, actually, he says, what Reb said is regret protects beings from anger. So if we can notice it and regret it and repent it, make every effort to let go of the anger, that regret will protect us going forward. And then this really hit me. And he said, we need to have patience before anger arises to kind of keep it from going further. Patience with ourselves, patience with what we're angry about. In other words, kind of pausing and looking before we do it. But then also, he said, we need to have patience with what has arisen. Patience with ourselves for what has arisen. And then the 10th one, not disparaging the triple treasure. Okay, not disparaging the triple treasures, or sometimes it's begrudging this triple treasure. He said, Buddha body is unfathomable, ungraspable. The Dharma body is unfathomable. Walking with the Sangha is a bridge for crossing over. So those are the only notes I got from that particular one. But when he was also talking about repentance at a certain point, and I can't remember exactly what he said about it, but something he said just really took me to this deep place. And I really feel that what happened when he was talking about this was he was talking from his own experience and his own effort. All of these things that he was saying came from his own bodhicitta, his own ability to awaken to his difficulty in keeping these precepts. And that, I think, that affected me so deeply. And perhaps that happened the day before too. But it really happened for me, so that it put me into this deep place of regretting certain things and seeing other things that I'd done. And particularly one thing, and some anger came up, and I acted on it during the week, and seeing that although I regretted the way that it got expressed, I didn't regret what I had done. That went back, or I didn't regret the spirit, that what was behind it. I didn't see it coming from a self-centered place. I saw it coming from a more altruistic place. And recently I was listening to the Dalai Lama. Let's see if I can bring this up. He said, bodhicitta is the altruistic state of enlightenment. The altruistic state of enlightenment, I say awakening instead of enlightenment, but altruistic. So bodhicitta, when it comes up, that inclination to awaken, not just for me, but for all beings, is naturally there. And so we recognize that we aren't just acting for ourselves, but we are acting within that relationship. And I just want to read you one more thing. I know it's 11 o'clock, but so the Bodhisattva precepts consist of 3 refuges, 3 pure precepts, and 10 grave precepts. The important point is to avoid thinking of the precepts as rules that regulate behavior, and instead regard them as invitations to clarify our determination to live our lives well. To regard them as invitations to clarify our determination to live our lives well. So there's a lot of ways to look at the precepts. And I talked about these invitations to cultivate the determination, to clarify our determination to live our lives well. I was talking about that before I went. This was a couple of weeks ago. And I couldn't remember where I got that quote from. I named the talk long before. But it turns out, interestingly enough, that I got it from this little pamphlet. When I Googled it, it took me to the Soto Zen Buddhist website that shows this tablet or this pamphlet. And so it was right there. And this pamphlet was put out by the same, what is it? Soto Zen International Center in San Francisco, which actually helped to sponsor this event, this Yukai. So it kind of brought it full circle for me. And I know it's 11 o'clock and we can finish up and those of you who have to go, or we can, if you have to go, please go. But if anybody wants to stay on and have some discussion before we end, I can spend a few more minutes about talking about this. Nothing? Should we finish up? I'm sorry that Thursday nights didn't get recorded because Brooke Genryu did a very amazing presentation about what happened. And because we had so much trouble getting on, we got on 15 minutes late and I completely forgot to record it. So I'm sorry, but maybe I'll try to twist her arm to do another presentation. Anyway, so let's finish up. I need somebody to do the response for the call-in response. And then I will do 3 vows and I'll do a formal exit. May the merit of this practice.
May the merit of this practice
Benefit all beings.
penetrate all beings
And bring peace.
and bring peace.
Sorry.